Hello, welcome to Hudson Records Listening Club with me, James Fagan, and Nancy Kerr, and Rob Harbron, who produced and engineered Twice Reflected Sun, the album that Andy Bell has kindly asked us to listen to with you, the listeners, today, and we're very delighted to do so. It's 10 years in just a few weeks ago. We celebrated the 10th anniversary of this record, Twice Reflected Sun. Really a turning point in so many ways for Nancy and me in our lives and our career in terms of when this came out. And we're very delighted today to be joined by Rob Harbron as well, who we were working with a lot at the time. We all lived in the same place, in fact, the same waterway, but more of that in a bit. And it was the third collaboration really with Rob that we'd done. So the other reason this was such a major point for Nancy and me is that it was the first record where every song on the record was written by Nancy, and I'm sure she has some things to say about that too. But before we go much further, I'd just like to say hello, Rob.
Hi, great to see you both. Looking forward to hearing this.
Yeah, us too. We haven't listened in any way in preparation for this for quite a while, so it's going to be new to us. Nancy, this was a turning point in so many ways. It was the first record where we'd recorded outside a studio, which these days doesn't seem like a big deal, but at the time it felt quite radical to be recording in a barn with Rob at the controls, albeit a very nicely appointed barn down in Somerset. But it was also the first album, apart from the two instrumentals which I composed, it was the first album that you wrote every song for, and that led to many things, including two solo albums so far by you, completely written by yourself. What did it feel like, and what do you remember about the year we recorded this, 2009? It was autumn, I think.
I think it was, as you say, it was a point of kind of turning and a bit of a watershed for us in terms of changing lots of ways of playing music and making music. And Rob was a big part of that as well, kind of facilitating us to be a bit more in control of how we sounded and how we played. And I also want to do a big shout out to Rick Foote, who is a big part of this record from about note 8, I think. There's a definite point where the bass kicks in, and that kind of, to me, gives the album a certain flavour, which I'm very fond of. But yeah, it's an important piece of writing for me. I was also, I think, about 25 weeks pregnant when I recorded the vocals for this, and my voice was really changing, so it's going to be interesting to listen back to that and those changes.
Well, Rob, the album starts with Queen of Waters, which in retrospect proved to be a bit of a farewell to the canal lifestyle, not just for Nancy and me, but for you as well, because you were living on a canal boat for a long period of that time during the development of our relationship with you as a musician and as an engineer as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was a kind of a farewell to the canal for all three of us, really, wasn't it? Within about a year.
That's right.
Each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's hear the track and then we can talk a bit more.
Well, away, my love, away, for we're sailing home today on a boat called Memory. Hey, oh, home, hearts that long for the land. Oh, she's like some Persian queen with her opal robe serene in the lamplight shimmering. Hey, oh, home, hearts that long for the land. On a blue jay morning, feathering thorny memories. Hey, oh, home, hearts have been too long away. On a well-worn byway, travelling magpie gathering. Farewell, Queen of Waters. Well, it's hard to roll in mirth when your feet don't touch the earth, and the wolf comes hungering. Hey, oh, ho, hearts that long for the land. Folly never foots the bill, and we all shall pay in full for a life of melody. Hey, oh, ho, hearts that long for the land. On a blue jay morning, feathering thorny memories. Hey, oh, ho, hearts have On a well-worn byway, travelling, magpie gathering, farewell, Queen of Waters.
Rick Foot, the bass player, said that remains one of his favourite notes he's ever played on the double bass, and it's brilliantly engineered, Rob. Thank you.
Got a lot of
I realise
impact.
actually, in terms of in modern production terms, if you like, leaving it until after a whole verse and a little link, and then a bit more before you get the beans, is kind of leaving it a bit long by
But it is
contemporary
proper
standards.
delayed gratification.
Oh, there must be better
Yeah, I like it.
ways for to keep the debts at bay and the whiskey trickling. Hey oh ho, hearts that long for the land. On a blue jay morning, feathering thorny memories. Hey oh ho, hearts have been too long away. On a well-worn byway, travelling, magpie gathering, farewell, Queen of Waters.
So you can hear Nancy's fiddle and my bouzouki and Rick Foot on bass. But Rob, like so many tracks on the record, there's some very beautiful and subtle influence from Rob Harbron there, with some guitar underpinning
is,
the
isn't
chords,
there?
just
Yeah.
adding some texture in there as well.
Yeah, I enjoy playing guitar. There's a couple on this actually that it's the first time I'd used a tuning that I really love now. It's a CG and then standard on top. It's my attempt to get that effect of the bass coming in,
Yeah.
even when Rick wasn't there. It was a thing we played with quite a bit as a trio as well, wasn't it? Was layering the guitar and the bouzouki.
Definitely.
It's like that invisible shimmery thing where you know there's strings there but you can't necessarily hear exactly what instrument is there. And that was quite big for us, moving from being definitely a duo where you can hear two things to like general atmospheric sound where there's two people in the lead but there's other stuff kind of happening as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how much like a band track this feels like, even though, I mean, we'd been a trio, but I don't think the four of us had played together with Rick before we did this. I know you
No.
played with him enough. Yeah, nice to hear that.
It's funny, I really wasn't an experienced songwriter when I wrote that song. And so a lot of it felt like a kind of test piece and working out how you make songs like that, or how you definitely how you perform them and how you record them. And now I think that song is the template for lots of songs that I make now. Not that I write the same song again, but I'm often thinking, oh, that song did that and had that space, and it was really important for me.
I don't think either of us realised at the time how emotionally important that song would become either, because shortly after making that record and that song, we had Hamish, our first baby, and we moved away from the canal and we came up to Sheffield. And that song really became sort of like a swan song for our 10-year or more life on the canal. And I think that's one of the loveliest things about songwriting, really, is that something that just comes out of a few verses of poetry can come to mean so much. And that song has proved very popular with our listeners as well over the years. So lovely to hear that again, and lovely to listen to it with Rob, probably the first time we have listened to it together in that decade. But there's more to come. So just a brief introduction to the next song. I was just blown away when Nancy started writing more than just a couple of songs an album, but decided to write a whole record. And the next song, Jerilderie, comes out of a trip that Nancy and I made through the centre of New South Wales down into Victoria, through the town of Jerilderie, which is where the great legendary bushranger Ned Kelly had his last good weekend before it all went pear-shaped. And Nancy, you read, when we were in Jerilderie, you read a letter that Ned Kelly had written, the typical desperate last letter of an outlaw who knows his days are numbered, wanting to explain his position to the world. And this song resulted from that letter, didn't it?
Yeah, and then musically the references for it were actually all American. This was kind of the closest I got at the time to writing a sort of old-time sort of American colonial, I don't know, that kind of narrative seemed to fit, and that kind of music seemed to fit. So this song came out in one go. I just wrote it down, literally like a kind of ballad confessional with this very spare tune. And so then when we came to record it, it fitted to do something actually quite spare. There's hardly any harmony that I recall in this. It's really all about melody and that man's voice kind of coming through.
And Rob, you got Rick to use the bowed bass, I think.
I think he bows it, yeah.
Sorry, Andy.
Gerildery. How are you going there, James?
The road's my home, I know no other, counting miles like dying leaves, and there's no comfort for a footsore soldier. Carry my bones to Gerildery. The desert wind put out my campfire on the banks of the burning creek, and 1,000 cat heads have cut this ranger travelling on to Gerildery. I never stole a horse or saddle, never a steer did they trace to me, but they tracked our sorrow in the dust so bloody, 50 miles from Gerildery. Last night my poor departed mother and long dead sister said to me, you've stained our spirits with your bloody fighting, never you'll make Gerildery. But living poor, it's like those cat heads, drawing blood and stinging deep. And I wish no mercy on the Queen of England, hear me cry from Gerildery.
It's quite a short reverb, Rob, isn't it, on the vocal? It's very immediate and it's quite direct.
Yeah, it was, you want the vocal to be there, especially on a song like that. The more reverb, a lot of people don't quite twig this with reverb. The more you use, the further away it pushes the thing you want. Every singer in the world wants more reverb.
I like it.
The vocal further up front as well. Yeah, it suits this track great.
For a footsore soldier, carry my
I love the bouzouki power chords as well. It's very metal.
It's quite metal, isn't it? Yeah.
No other, counting miles like dying leaves, and there's no comfort for a footsore soldier.
I like the way the next track runs on, so we'll just hear it run on.
Dust bowl day, this town is crowned in red. Dollar-ride tires of lying aground and clings to the wind instead. Dust in my eyes, crying grit on my skin. The feeling of flying too close to the wind, and dollar-ride skies over dry hills blowing me home. On the island, you'll climb a tall tree before you reach the leaves. In the orchard, the olive and vine, no blessed rain relieves. Dust in my bones, blowing brittle and grey. History, just a few graves in the clay, and dollar-ride skies over dry hills blowing me home. Is this how the the end of our world will be, digging the dust of our legacy, praying for rain to wash away footprints and memories of dollar-eyed skies over dry hills, blowing me home.
So I'll just say that in a kind of songwriter nerd way, that's one of only 2 songs that I've ever written that has a middle 8 in it. Everyone always tells you if you're going to be a songwriter, you have to write middle 8s in your songs, and I'm like, no, not really, not if you're a folk singer.
Exactly what I was about to ask you. Was that actually the first middle 8 you wrote? Because that's
Yes.
a good one, as they go.
It's okay. The other one I wrote is amazing as well, but I'm done now. That's it.
Rick Foot sounds like he's been playing with us forever in this track. And
Yeah.
it was stunning. He turned up with 6 chord charts and ended up doing 9 songs in one session.
So beautiful.
And just sounds so intuitive on everyone. Beautiful.
On the island, you'll walk away east until you see the green.
Yeah, I'd forgotten actually how, like, we didn't pad out a lot of these tracks very much. I was thinking, oh, maybe there'd be a fiddle drone or a concertina pad or something, but actually a lot of the textures are bouzouki and bass, and it's...
Yeah, and I
really
remember
like
thinking
it.
this felt really full because there are some string parts, but they're super subtle, and there's only 3, 4 maximum.
It's partly why we picked Rick, because he's such a tonal player that he
Yeah,
actually
so melodic.
he's a real presence in a track.
Bright skies over dry hills, blowing me home.
That's one of the ones from this album that we actually do still play a fair amount. This would
Absolutely.
be one that we do get out in a set and think, oh, might fancy singing that.
I love that song Nancy wrote because it's got family connections. It's about Tasmania, and which is where my mum's side of the family are from. So that's a thrilling song to listen back to. The next song has been a staple of our live set.
Yeah, it's probably much more
ever
played
since
than
I heard it.
anything.
And once
anything
again,
else.
I was just so flattered that Nancy would write such a song as this and then hand it over to me to sing.
I don't remember handing it. I remember you suddenly starting playing it and me going, oh yeah, it's a James Fagan song. Of course it is. You did. And we were in Sydney. Now, I wrote most of this album in Australia.
Yeah.
Which I always found quite a creative thing to do because I had a kind of different headspace and a bit of distance from things was always what I did, didn't I? I always kind of wrote things while we were there. So I wrote this and was quite pleased with it, and then you sort of wrested it from me.
I've never been able to get it out of my head ever since I heard it, and it's such a strong song and it's such a strong title. I believe I am slightly possessed by this song. I am the fox. Cheers.
Morning.
Three, two, one,
Trademark
pump.
Pinky.
I am the fox, and I'll tell you true what your hounds do think of me and I of you. When lavish scraps fall no longer from your knee, he will slip his rope and we will brothers be. I am the fox, and I'll tell you true what your hounds do think of me and I of you. When lavish scraps fall no longer from your knee, he will slip his rope and we will brothers be. You masters all in fine sheets at night, dreaming of your dinners rich and pennies bright. When you awake, raging naked to the air, you will find your coffers stripped and cupboards bare. For I am the fox, and I'll tell you true what your hounds do think of me and I of you. When lavish scraps fall no longer from your knee, he will slip his rope and we will brothers be. Then comes a day when the trumpets sound, and the hunter hears no howl from fox or hound. Then he who owns every army in the land will have to go with bowl of begging in his hand. For I am the fox, and I'll tell you true, what your hounds do think of me and I of you. When lavish scraps fall no longer from your knee, he will slip his rope and we will brothers be.
It's really obvious to me, Rob, listening to this mix and the way that you've produced this track, that you knew our music really well by this point. You'd engineered our previous duo album for us at Fellside Records, and we'd played in a trio with you for a couple of years by this point as well, and made an album with you in the trio, Station House. And I think you can hear in the mix that you knew us inside out. You knew how our voices worked together. You knew how our fiddle
interacted. Bass bit. Wait, I love the spooky bass. Anyway, carry on. Yeah, and where each thing should fit and where each thing was strong.
Where the snow lies bare, winter winds will hide our scent from hardened hair.
Yeah, I guess for me in mixing this, it was like one of the first chances I got to actually do a thing I've been trying to do for ages, which is not do too much mixing.
Yeah.
Let the stuff in the track mix itself, because there wasn't too much happening, you know. Just got that right.
I am the fox, and I'll tell you true, what your hounds do think of me and I of you. When lavish scraps fall no longer from your knee, he will slip his rope and we will brothers be. He will slip his rope and we will brothers be.
I've forgotten that chord.
Fancy chord. That's a grammar school chord. We got that.
We've had the ghost of Rick, not that he's dead, but we've had the ghost of his bass playing with us for the rest of the next 10 years. We've done it once with him since, I think, but what a brilliant bass player.
Always hear him in there. Cool.
So that's I Am the Fox, and I just want to very briefly introduce the next track. I'd written 2 instrumentals which we used on this record, which was thrilling for me, but I definitely felt that they were just, at the time, I just felt they were placeholders really for Nancy's songwriting, because that's what was really coming through. But I think they mean a bit more than that to me now. This tune is called The Floating Mountains, and I wrote it in New Zealand, which is, Rob, you spent a bit of time there in your youth as well, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, as a kid, we spent a year living in
New
Zealand.
It's a beautiful country, and the first time Nancy and I went there, we were stunned by the fact that every bend you drove around there was a new view, and you had to pull the car over. And one particular day we drove around a corner and saw what appeared to be, it was an optical illusion, but there was a big cloud bank, and above the cloud bank was a mountain range, so it really looked like the mountains were just floating on air. And this tune pretty much popped into my head on the spot. This was an example, Rob, where we actually played as a quartet in the barn at Home Farm. You set up 4 separate stations within the room. We were very blessed with a big room to record in, a big live room. And this is live, 4 people, bass, you're playing concertina, and Nancy on fiddle and me on bouzouki. And we did it in one go. And I think you can really hear that in the track. Let's have a listen. I realise I made that recording technique sound like a novelty, but it's pretty much the only way you do record now, isn't it, Rob?
Well, there's a kind of live in one room is great, and it's always great to do that. But there's a particular sort of thrill and panic that comes from pressing record and then turning around and picking up your concertina and just not letting yourself look at the meters or and just think about playing. You know?
That's being 2 people at once, isn't it? Really, which is a big ask. But I think it's, you can't just assume that if music sounds like it's lots of people being together playing it, that is what's happening. But that is what's happening in this track, and that shows where we were at the point of recording, wasn't it? That was no longer the paradigm for making folk music together, was being in the same room, because we were looking for separation and control and just whole new ways of doing it. But this was a bit closer to the source.
Yeah, it's much more normal for me now to record like that than it ever was back then, you know.
Yeah.
I can see Rick playing this. He's such a physical player. See him leaned over the bass and just getting the most out of every note.
Breakdown now, isn't there? Really like this.
I think this happened on the day, didn't it, Rob? We just...
Yeah, it probably did. That's an attempted bass solo there. We didn't quite let him go all the way, but that's a definite bass solo attempt.
He's a jazzer.
Cheeky little seventh there.
I got an unauthorised seventh because we always struggled with that, didn't we? Between us.
There might have been some discussion.
Yeah, there was definitely discussion.
I think I played the seven.
Actually, you got a seventh in. I was never allowed sevenths.
Who played the seventh?
It's a lovely tune, James. It's quite song-like in a way, even though it is the instrumental kind of part of it.
Thank you. I think that's how I write. Hello, Harry. Just say a quick hello. This is Harry. He's being very good upstairs.
Hi, Harry.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Okay, off you go, love. We'll
Thanks,
be up in a bit. We're just going to listen to a few more tracks. Shut the door, darling. Good boy.
So he wasn't even a twinkle when we were making this.
So, Rob, the next song, Flower Picker's song, I seem to remember your production being extremely valuable in this track. Do you have memories of making this next track? For a start, you played guitar, you sang on it, but also you had quite a lot to say about...
I think we gigged this quite a lot before we recorded it, actually.
I think this is maybe one of the only ones we actually did gig a bit before we recorded it. And yeah, it probably feels more like a trio track than some of the others. Maybe not, I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I think it does. When, in my memory, I taught this to you guys in the dressing room of the Durham Gala Theatre during a Folkworks summer school thing. We were booked to do a concert as part of that, and we got this out and sort of got quite a quick version of it. And I did just want to say about this song that I don't know if other artists ever feel this, but I definitely felt that changing a bit from being a traditional player purely to playing my own songs and writing my own songs was a bit gnarly and a bit tricky, and I had to keep justifying it. And one of the ways that I justified it would be to go, okay, so Queen of Waters basically sounds like a folk song, and Jerilderie, like I said before, it's like a kind of country sort of old time, but they sound quite trad. And then this was definitely, it felt like a pop song, and it was always the one where I slightly relaxed into it, went, this just sounds pretty and poppy, and I'm quite, I don't know, I felt quite relaxed into it. And now I write a lot more songs like this, but I think playing it as a trio was quite it was quite part of that, and it was quite fun just building up these sweet sounds.
A bunch of flowers and a sore half hour before these seedling sunflowers see me out of here. Another day by the grey highway, the fairest flowers fade, my dear. A clutch of red petals that hangs its head, the way you did this.
That's you, Rob, on guitar.
Yeah, that's right.
Tears. An hour or two quickened by dreams of you, the fairest flowers fade, my dear. Silver sand trickling through my hand, another people trader's feeble alibi, another sky where the free birds fly, the fairest flowers fade, my dear. A splash of blue cracking the sky into a thunder train that tracks my spirits out of here. A cloud of rain.
And with this, we ended up leaving the bass off and just using the bass from my guitar.
We did. That adds to that lightness, I think.
To get a different thing. We were at the point where we might have just made a whole record that was built around the bass, and we sort of made that decision not to.
That's right. Yeah, I knew there was something different about this one.
Like Russian dolls, the fairest flowers fade, my dear.
Probably if we hadn't gigged it, we wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Trickling through my hand as another town of frowning strangers passes by, another sky where the free birds fly.
That was our big moment, Rob. That was our BB heaven, wasn't it? That
You
was
had some good BBs there.
Silver sand trickling through my hand, another people trader's feeble alibi, another sky where the free birds fly, the fairest flowers fade, my dear. Another sky where the free birds fly, the fairest flowers fade, my dear.
I think there's a tiny part of me that's sad that was never picked up for a margarine advert or something. I think I was just a bit behind the thing. It's sweet. Yeah. It's really sweet.
I like that one. Yeah,
I like listening to that too. All right, my last lead vocal on the record now, Hauling On, a song that I remember first singing at the Cabargo Folk Festival.
I think I wrote it for you instead of buying you a birthday present that year.
I'll take it.
Keep hauling on, mighty the jaws of morning. War has made the billows roar as we keep hauling on.
So full, it's such a full kind of wash to sing over, isn't it?
We set sail like bold Phoenicians for the gold on the horizon. Every soul lost to salvation, every song adieu, adieu.
A lot of the imagery in this song comes from Jaws by Steven Spielberg, and Nancy's favourite film, and relates closely to the story told by Robert Shaw's character about the USS Indianapolis.
I know it sounds a bit high concept, but to me, that's a perfect story for a folk song.
Absolutely.
That's also a bit of a shanty, that is also an anti-war song. And I think this whole album was a bit kind of smuggling stories in, but they're just songs as well. They're quite sort of open. So
This track also contains the one drop in, Rob, doesn't it? I rushed up to your place in Stroud and said, I've got a concertina line and I need you to record it now.
And we still hear this. If we sing this, we always kind of air guitar the concertina, air concertina the bit.
You're very obliging, thank you.
Little arpeggiated concertina drop in
Exactly.
any day of the week.
It's like Bach.
I think you were in the middle of making a stew on top of the range. You just dropped it in.
Yeah, that was before we had a kitchen, that's right.
Yes, it wasn't
We
a
had a
range,
desk.
it was a stove.
We had a mixing desk, but no stove. I always really liked your lead vocal on this. It's really mellow.
It's a good song to sing.
This is also one of the first songs we did with Melrose Quartet before we were really a quartet.
Yeah,
we
true.
threw this into the repertoire because we could all kind of join in.
Made the billows roar as we keep hauling on.
If you can dedicate a song to a listener in a listening club, I'd like to sing this for Marie Robertson, who requested just recently that we do a listening club of this very album, almost predicting that Andy Bell would call us a week later. So, Marie, good morning in Queensland, and we hope you're enjoying this.
That was really an instrumental middle eight, wasn't it?
Oh,
I
discuss.
think that might be middle eight number 2.5.
That might be what I do. That might be my thing.
On that water, like white gulls caught by the weather, every siren singing danger, every song adieu, adieu. Keep hauling on, mighty the jaws of morning. War has made the billows roar as we keep hauling on. Keep hauling on, mighty the jaws of morning. War has made the billows roar as we keep hauling on.
That stands up well. That's,
I like that.
Listened
I
to
might
that
sing
for a
that-
really
sing
long
that
time.
more.
Yeah, we should
Be
get
nice
that
to do
out.
that with you again, Rob. one
Yeah,
of
we
these
should get
days.
that out and
Yeah,
bang
it'd be
it
nice.
again.
I think we did it at Sidmouth once.
Yeah.
Nancy, the next track, Love Is Him, I think is a bit of a breakthrough for you as a writer, and I think it marks a move towards more conceptual songwriting, more poetic.
You didn't think the Jaws thing was conceptual?
Quite conceptual. Possibly more William Blakey, shall I put it that way? Blakey.
Blakesque.
Can you tell us a bit about this next one?
This is called Lover's Hymn, and honestly, I don't remember much about what I was thinking.
Darwin.
Except, no, this isn't the Darwin one. That's coming
No,
up.
that's later.
Yeah, no, this was. I know what you mean because it does. It's a bit of a template song for how I write now, and it's kind of full of, I don't know, imagery that I like. the thing that I really remember about it is that the first phrase when I was writing it is the same as to be a pilgrim. I based it all around that. So I think I was just trying to write a hymn that wasn't a hymn. And I don't really remember much else about it, except although I was working today in the studio and I was talking about the process of making this, because I actually think this was quite tricky to make, because I wanted to work really freely, but I also wanted to put multiple parts on it. And I remember you working really hard on this, Rob, actually, to make it sound what it was, which was kind of intuitive and free, but also to make it fit. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's that balance, isn't it, between something feeling in the room and quite kind of elemental, if you like, but also it having shape and build and structure. And it's definitely a thing we were playing. I mean, we were playing with it all through the album, but this track... Yeah. It's quite exposed, isn't it?
It was, and minimal. It's that thing where, as an artist, as a performer, you can't just have the pulse that's in your head. You have to have a pulse that's communicated so people know where they're at. And I feel like with this song, I wrote it with viola, and I think that I sing it and I'm accompanying it with viola, and then we were putting parts on top of that, as I recall. Anyway, it was just that tension between being very, free and like letting people know where it was going. And I do, from listening to it fairly recently, I do like where we got with it. It reminds me of a kind of harmonium sort of, church organ kind of vibe was what we were doing. So, Lover's Hymn.
You'd be a pilgrim, heading on through every weather, just loving idols, silent in stone. You sing your anthem, stepping nimble to each measure, only to stumble on your way home. Let there be a winding road, a question mark untwisting, and on your lover's lips a gypsy whisper. Let there be a light aloud, a quiet sky on Canaan, and in his hand a home and all its meaning. Don't fear an omen, like a virgin's eyes upon you, black clouds above you, preaching of storms. Let flawed adorers put a threadbare robe around you, their flame inside you, keeping you warm. Let there be a winding road, a question mark untwisting, and on your lover's lips a gypsy whisper. Let there be a light aloud, a quiet sky on Canaan, and in his hand a home and all its meaning.
Yeah, now I think it cuts to strings, or becomes more about the strings.
The light is dying.
Or maybe that's later.
In the windows of the temple, while on the mountain.
I do remember with this there was a real thing of having to just feel where the beat was, because no one was actually stating it, but we just had to...
It's that thing where I remember doing a session with Martin once where he said you have to play as if you're accompanying like an old traditional singer, and you don't know where they're necessarily going to go with it. So it's that proper like parlando thing. But now listening to it, we did get to a really solid place with it.
Let there be a light aloud, a quiet sky.
I love in the next chorus how Rob and Nancy do this rundown through a variation. It's just beautiful. Here it comes, like a cascade.
A question mark and twisting, and on your lover's lips a gypsy whisper, let there be a lighter road, a quiet star.
That's very us, actually.
And in his hand a home and all its.
Would have been easy though to feel we had to go big by the end of that. So that a little melodic thing like that is just a way of something happening without it.
It's all you need,
Feeling
exactly.
it has to go big. Yeah, lovely.
I love that one.
I might sing that again. I quite like it. It's quite a nice melody. It's that one of those things I do where it's just a scale, really, but you just sing it with conviction.
But also, I think when you write a song like that, you've no idea how it will be perceived. And I happen to know that song meant a lot to a lot of people, and you don't know till you put something out there what it will mean to people. I said that my last song was my last lead, but I do have one more, and it's "Sweet Peace." And I think this is a cracking song that Nancy wrote. I love singing it still, and it's one that I should do again. This one's fun, and it's got a bit more of an Americana feel to it, and we went to town on that aspect of it, Rob. I think
gently to town.
Gently to town. Yeah.
This is Sweet Peace.
I think quite a lot of our trio time really was spent trying to faintly disguise our Americana influences, and occasionally we'd let them out a little bit more.
But don't you think that in some way has kind of percolated through recording culture now, in that actually lots of things that we learnt from Americana music we still use, even though we're not necessarily playing that repertoire or playing in that style even, but that idea that you can very clearly convey a kind of authentic voice, some really rich instrumentation, that all for me came from listening to really great American recordings of like almost traditional country type material. And now we do it, but we do it whether we're playing like Playford tunes or whatever. So,
I love the message in this song. This is a sweet piece.
Also, this always makes me think of...
we should thank Andy Bell at this point for waiting so patiently for us to press play on.
Can I just say that I always think of Emily Smith? Because I think she sang this. She sings this song.
Absolutely.
This always makes me think of her.
I'll take wine, just a little in the evening, and I've been known for my barroom dancing, and I don't care.
What?
I have.
Saving,
I think I dropped one of Rob's brand new Martin guitar string holders during a session of so-called barroom dancing at the Warwick Folk Festival.
Really?
Yeah. Turned up though the next day, didn't it, Rob?
Oh, yes, someone found it.
String peg.
Yeah, the little
black
string pin.
pin thing, yeah.
Nice rosewood pin found on the floor of the beer tent.
Who knew?
I just want to know where we go, we'll be gathering peace. Sweet peace, the seed that we cling to.
Classic Martin playing there, Rob. The rake of the...
Carry it home.
Well, the nods to the Americana thing, I learnt a huge amount from listening to, I guess it's the Alison Krauss and Union Station thing, and they got it off Tony Rice before that ability to just give something a bit of groove with a little bit of picking. You don't need drums, you don't need everything.
And a fire in the forest.
Cool.
Well, I need friends, not the pennies in my pocket. I just want to know
Quite wholesome,
where we go, we'll be
Wholesome.
gathering
It's wholesome.
peace. Sweet peace, the seed that we cling to.
I think the session for this one was called Sweet Peas, I have to admit. I'm pretty sure.
Sweet peace, the song that we sing.
It's been called that many times since.
Many times.
Like a river calling, carry it home. speak.
I had to borrow your mandolin, Rob, for that. I didn't have one of my own.
Not a good one.
You're
at
a
the
generous
time.
man.
They cry if they never saw summers. They won't care about saints or sinners. They'll just want to know when we go, we were gathering peace, sweet peace, the seed that we cling to.
I remember really enjoying doing the backing vocals for this one. They were really fun because they were backing vocals, like they were meant to have that blocky, quite kind of almost quite bland kind of idea that you're just filling in the notes just to make it sound
Carry
cool.
it home like a river calling. Carry it home.
And I had to learn to play that riff and sing that harmony afterwards. I learnt it off the record.
Excellent. I remember doing the BVs, Rob. You had us up in, there was a sort of there's a mezzanine level in that beautiful room.
Yeah, like a little gallery thing. Yeah.
And it was was the sound a bit flatter up there or something? Was that why you were using it? Was it just to create a different space?
Yeah, I think it was because I can't remember why. It just sounded good, I think wanting it to be, to not, I honestly can't remember, but it's always good to try if you've got the luxury of trying different bits of a room, you know.
Yeah.
It was radical for me, and as I said at the opening of this, the idea of not recording in a studio, this really was the first time I had experienced
Or like
that.
creating a studio.
So we went to your family's place, and this space was just incredible, and it was it really was very liberating for me. But on the next track, you'll hear that one of the things we battled with, apart from a lot of birds that were nesting in the walls of Home Farm, were a new batch of black Labrador puppies, which were next to your engineering booth. And if you listen very carefully on the next track, at the very end, you'll hear one of those black
Is there a
Labrador
puppy
puppies
squeak?
yelping.
There
at
is
the
an
end.
actual
Fantastic.
squeak.
Yeah. There's nothing we could do about it, which is appropriate, really, because this is a lullaby. I actually wrote this on the narrowboat one night. Nancy was expecting Hamish and was, in need of a little bit of soothing music one night. And I walked in and played this on the end of the bed, and I said, night, night, and played her this. And she said, what's that? And I said, I don't know. I think I'll call it night, night. So this is a lullaby I wrote for Nancy on the boat. And this is one of the few times I've ever been able to indulge my interest in multi-tracked strings. It's something I keep threatening to do a whole album of. Most people are probably relieved that I haven't, but you'll hear me on bouzouki, guitar, and Rob Harbron's mandolin. In fact, it's Rob Harbron's guitar as well.
So this is just you?
Just me
Wow.
playing Night Night and a dog. Rob, it reminds me of when I was a kid, my mum and dad used to play Alan Stivell a lot, and they were always like one more part than was strictly necessary. But I love that sound still. It's something about it.
I was thinking it sounds like a soundtrack to people who go and live in like a Viking longhouse for a bit, or go back to the land.
Well, we sort of did.
It's got that mists of time, but also 1970s kind of feel to it.
What I most enjoyed about recording it was having to learn the variations and play them in unison on all the instruments, which is actually a lovely thing to do.
Well, we had that thing, didn't we, where we were very into the idea that every time you play a tune again, just maybe have to vary one little thing, or maybe nothing. Maybe you don't vary anything. Maybe things don't build, they just, do you know what I mean? They get quite meditative and they just repeat. And this is quite, for me, this is like that. There's little tiny changes here and there, but not big ones.
Listen out for the dog, folks. You have to be really quiet. Somewhere in there.
No, it's no dog. It's just folklore, no dog.
Lovely. It's all part of the atmosphere.
Just before we conclude, a couple of thank yous. First of all, to Andy and to Hudson Records for hosting us today. We're really grateful for the opportunity to listen again to this album, Twice Reflected Sun, 10 years, just a few weeks ago. And to celebrate that, because it's actually out of print now, we've put it on Bandcamp. So do download yourself a copy from Bandcamp. And if you're interested in the music we made with Rob Harbron here, and we should thank Rob greatly for his time this evening. He's had a very busy day, as has Nancy, teaching young people folk over Zoom, which is an exhausting and very gratifying process. Check out the trio album as well that we made with Rob called Station House, which is also on Bandcamp. Thanks to Andy, as I said. Thank you to Lizzie Doe. This was the first album that Lizzie did the artwork for, and she did an absolutely stunning job. And we've gone back to Lizzie time and time again since then. She's done all the artwork.
All of our albums.
For all of Nancy's work since, and all of the Melrose Quartet records as well. And she's a great talent. So thank you to her. Any other thank yous?
Rick Foot, who's
Absolutely.
all over it,
Yeah.
like a rash, as you'd hope. And I just want to say before we finish, this next track is, I think, a good example of how this record slightly changed us. And thanks to Rob as well for being part of that, because it was a record where for the first time we didn't have to do everything all the time. We were very getting used to just making music with lots of space around it. Do you know what I mean? And that last track that you played is a good example of it was just that quietness, and it's our penultimate track for the album, where lots of people might do something splashy and huge, and this was much more, for the first time for us, it was much more about being reflective.
That was a lot. I had to let go a lot to do that, and it subsequently was very useful because we were then parents, and Nancy was going away a lot on tour solo, and I'm used to it now. But at the time, we'd been playing together non-stop for pretty much 15 years.
And live as well,
And
crucially
live.
trying to make a particular sound live.
So it was a big thing. It was this whole album, as I said, a turning point, and one of those was learning to give each other space. Well, me learning to give her space.
No, so I'm not even on the last track. You can't get more space.
Rob, thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. It's lovely to listen to it with you. And
yeah, really nice to hear this again. And yeah,
been a while.
Fond memories of making this record. Lovely.
But the last track is effectively a duo, which we didn't know it would be, between Nancy Kerr and Rick Foot. And I happen to know Rick still sings this song live with other artists because he really likes it. It's this one is about Charles Darwin.
This is the Charles Darwin song. So all of those gorgeous projects that various EFDSS and Folk by the Oak and stuff have done. One of the first ones was the Darwin Song Project, and I was really naffed off because I couldn't be in it because I was in Australia. So I wrote a song for the project, even though I wasn't in it. And this is it, and it's called Rammed Earth, and it's full of imagery about biology, really, and evolution and Charles Darwin. And I can't remember why we decided just to make it this vocal and bass part, but I think it's got you on backing.
I sing
as well.
BVs, but I think it was just one of those things. We didn't quite know how amazing Rick would fit into this record until he turned up, and this was, bearing in mind, he turned up with 6 tracks ready to go, and this was one that we just threw at him. I think he'd heard it once before.
And it was his enthusiasm. He just went, yes, we're doing that as a duo. It's going to be. So I'm really proud. And the ways that he plays it, I would never have been able to accompany it the way that he has done it. So it's really
Thank
him.
you for listening, everybody. And Twice Reflected Sun, 10 years on. Thanks, and again to Hudson Records. See you later. This is Rammed Earth.
We could walk in the woods where we all are still children, in the darkness where folly is free, but the shadows must flee, and like lizards they scatter when you throw your bright light upon me. For rammed earth and cool walls shelter our hearts and counter our faults, and your wedge would eyes strip me down and teach me the hardest craft of all. You can show me a bird with the wings of an angel, and it shares in my summer and spring. For when heads they hang heavy with thought's gravitation, we can switch on our nature and sing. For rammed earth and cool walls shelter our hearts and counter our faults, and your wedge would eyes strip me down and teach me the hardest craft of all. So build me a house from the bottom.
You did a nice job on that bass, Rob. Sounds really good, man.
It's like it's vibrating in your face. It's great.
Just the way you played it.
Yeah.
Just a good
That you
voice.
teach to your children, we are made of the same.
Quite posh chords in it, this one.
Hey,
Some quite posh chords in it. Well, one. Not that posh, but I'm quite proud of it.
It's actually a real luxury to let the bass fill the full range rather
Yeah.
than feeling you've got to make space for other stuff.
Yeah, you don't hear it loads.
Strip me down and teach me the hardest craft of all. For rammed earth and cool walls shelter our hearts and counter our faults, and your wedge would eyes strip me down and teach me the hardest craft of all.
thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Andy. And thanks, Rick Foot.